let's look at the race in space. I'm joined now by Terry van Haren. He's ex-RAAF Air Commodore and pilot. He's now Managing Director of Leolabs Australia. Terry, thank you so much for your time. While I've just been talking about the cyber concerns there with Rob Potter, the space race is extraordinary at the moment, isn't it? With China outpacing the United States on its number of space launches.
Yeah, g'day, Kieran. Look, it's very similar in some respects to the cyber operations that are going on, but in space we really see grey zone activity or hybrid warfare occurring. And according to the Vice Chief of Space Operations, General Thompson of the United States, China's now out launching the US in military capabilities 2-1. So there's a lot more hardware going into space as we speak.
Yeah, Terry, so how concerned should the Australian government be about this increase in the Chinese activity? Do they say it's for civilian purposes, or what's the story around these various launches?
Well, there's been a real strong rise in Chinese launch activity, testing activity and deployment of military assets in space. Yesterday, in fact, they hit 49 launches for this calendar year, and certainly they'll achieve 50 plus launches in the coming weeks. Now that's an all-time record for China, and in fact the US hasn't launched at that rate since 1967. So they're certainly deploying a lot more capability in space, and also we've got the very interesting things such as fractional orbital bombardment system testing. Here in Australia, we need to realise we're on the front line of potential space conflict in the Indo-Pacific. Many of these launches we're talking about, probably about 70%, everything that's actually got a southern inclination on launch is coming over Australia on first orbit. And I think it was only in October that here in Sydney people were reporting seeing a rocket activity. Well, it was a Chinese launch, SJ-21, an orbital system going up to the geo belt that came straight over Sydney on the second stage burn. Everyone could see it. And it certainly was one of these very suspicious satellites. They said it was a orbital inspection and debris management satellite going into the geo belt out at 36,000 kilometres above our heads, but there is no debris in that area. And it's a very suspicious satellite because it's actually given birth to a sub-satellite that are now basically patrolling that part of space.
Yeah, right. They're very suspicious indeed. And all of this follows that recent test by the Russians of an anti-satellite missile. How damaging is that sort of development in space? And I know your company looks at the fallout, the debris from those sorts of operations. Explain to our viewers how that works. We've got a few of those images as well of the debris and how you map it.
Yeah, look, that activity was another real statement, I think, this time by the Russians, that they have the capability and the intent to fight in space. They used a noodle weapon system there to shoot down one of their defunct satellites, but it's a very irresponsible action because it caused at least 1,000, many more trackable objects in low Earth orbit. Now these debris field, if you like, which we've been tracking, is now going to be a problem for years, if not decades, in low Earth orbit, because all this debris is moving around the Earth at around 8 kilometres per second, and it's lethal to anything in its path. Our company actually tracks all activity in low Earth orbit, and our specialty is tracking the debris fields and then calculating the collision risks to other users in space. So yes, it's a real concern. It actually gives us a taste of what space war looks like, and I think it's all too real, and we need to realise that there's a lot of risks and issues in space.
Yeah, and the aftermath of that debris it's very interesting, and that's from one test. Is our government doing enough to protect us from the potential threat from space, do you think?
Well, look, we've got some firm plans for the Australian government to start the Defence Space Command next year under the Air Force, and also a roadmap over the next 10 years to deliver certain capabilities, including a sovereign space domain awareness capability. But 10 years is a long time when you see this type of activity in space, and I think we need to speed up. The rate of development of the Chinese space capabilities, their orbital weapon systems, and even potentially attacks from orbit now are increasingly dramatically. And they have the American apparatus very worried. I suppose what I would like to see is us to move forward quickly on all our plans and to bring in options such as ours, and that is to build, manufacture space surveillance radar systems here in Australia and deploy them such that we can keep transparency in space, really get our heads around what's actually occurring on a day-to-day basis.
And if we conclude where we began, you don't need any more reminder of the intensity of that issue at the moment, but the fact that the Chinese are about to hit that threshold of 50 space launches, matching the United States at the height of the Cold War, says it all, doesn't it?
It says it all, Kieran. And, you know, when we talk about space launches now, one launch may have a payload of up to a dozen satellites. You know, the satellites are a lot smaller, therefore there's a lot more military capability being launched into space. So the launch numbers are quite stark, but the actual activity numbers are much higher. And we're certainly seeing a strategic competition in space. We're seeing grey zone or hybrid warfare in space. And unfortunately, you know, just like cyber, it's the front line. It's where, you know, competition goes to conflict very quickly. And if it does go to conflict, then it becomes one of these situations there where we'll suffer. Our economy, our way of life. I wouldn't be able to drive my car in here and have navigation systems or see the time of day properly. A whole bunch of things would actually stop. And that's a great concern. We've got really no control. Hopefully we can create visibility and even a bit of transparency to create sustainment in space and to create deterrence to call out these irresponsible actions. So at least Australia has a diplomatic voice and a voice to play here in trying to keep space safe and secure and sustainable.
Former Air Force Air Commodore and pilot, now Managing Director at Leolabs. Thank you, Terry Van Haren. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran. I enjoyed it. Thanks.